The United Methodist Church is a big tent denomination. We are large enough to include a wide variety of perspectives and values. Or at least we have been. Some of the most conservative United States churches are choosing to leave right now. Many years ago, I was sent to an area of the country that tends to practice Methodism rather differently than I do. And then I was asked to lead a small group of seniors in college who were experiencing a call to ordained ministry in the United Methodist Church, which seemed to me to be rife with issues. They spoke of God differently than I did. They made assumptions about God that I did not share. They'd lived different lives than I could understand. And let's be honest, I was confused even by the food. And then in the midst of all that, there was something profoundly familiar in talking with those college students. The differences in how we understood God weren't big enough to negate that I could sense God's love in them and for them. And there was a tingling awareness of their faithful decisions to live their lives, to share God's love. There's some embarrassment in this for me in that I was surprised. I discovered that I had believed that people who thought and spoke of God differently than I did weren't having authentic experiences of God. I discovered how small-minded I was. And as I processed that, I was reminded that everyone is on a faith journey. And at every step along it, we are doing the best we can. And we are wrong a lot, probably right a lot, but no one has it all down. And even if someone did, the context changes everything and requires adaptations from minute to minute. The places I thought others were wrong didn't negate God's work in their lives, which was great because that meant that the places I was wrong didn't negate God's work in my life either. Turns out, time and time again, that I am far more obsessed with perfection than God is, and God is willing to work with humans as we are. Phew. Many years later, 3 dear friends and I went on a retreat to write a confirmation curriculum that we would be excited to teach. We asked ourselves questions about what really mattered about our faith in our own lives and how we might communicate to others. The confirmation that I have taught here over the years is based on that curriculum, intentionally named A Jesus Way of Living. A Jesus Way, not the Jesus Way, because we knew by then that what worked for us wasn't what worked for everyone. And that was one of the most important things we wanted to teach young people in our confirmation classes. A quick reference point so we're all on the same page. The vows from baptisms, we're celebrating baptisms this week, are that we as a church, along with parents and grandparents, will do all in our power to teach these young people about what we know of God and God's ways. Then confirmation class aims to teach older children what they need to know about church and its beliefs and other ways of being faithful so that those children, those older children, can decide whether or not to confirm for themselves the vows made at their baptisms. One of the key components of a Jesus way of living confirmation curriculum is spending the first 15 minutes of any class engaged in a wide variety of spiritual practices and prayer traditions. We hoped to teach kids that there are many ways to access the divine and start them along the road of discovering how they tend to best connect with God. That is, of course, incredibly personal, and every person who has been through the course has had different experiences of each kind of prayer. For me, all of this seems like an affirmation of the reading from Luke today, where Jesus talks about how different his ministry is from John's, without claiming that either one is better than the other, right? So it ends with Jesus saying, "For John the Baptizer has come eating no bread and drinking no wine, and you all say he has a demon. The Son of Woman has come eating and drinking, and you all say, look, a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Yet wisdom is vindicated by all her children." Two men making opposite choices of how to live out their faith lives, and they were both right. That's what the last line means. Wisdom is holy and divine wisdom, sometimes talked about in the Bible as if wisdom is its own entity, and in the Gospels as if Jesus is wisdom's child. Wisdom is consistently female in the Bible. Dr. Gaffney says of this passage, "What behaviors does Jesus associate with his divine mother? A life full of joy and celebration, including those who, in the words of Paul, are of low status and despised. Yet he does not disdain the aesthetics path John follows. Indeed, he commends John with unparalleled praise. There is no single way to follow Jesus." I hope that this information about there being many ways to follow Jesus is freeing. And I want to admit that it can be really heavy. I think it is easier to believe that there are unique right answers, and if one simply follows all the rules, everything will be okay. It's easier to believe that there's a right way and a wrong way, and all someone has to do is make the right choice. It is way harder to believe that God works differently in different contexts, and in each of us, and even in each of us differently in different parts of our lives. It means that we are always learning and changing and seeking to hear the divine, even though we know we will never hear God's voice perfectly. It means often having to forgive oneself for beliefs that one no longer holds, like thinking that God only works authentically in people who think like I do. And that's heavy. It means constantly letting go of assumptions about God and godly living that aren't bringing life anymore. And that too can be hard work. Worst of all, in my opinion, it means being open to a huge range of possibilities and not being able to cross any of them out as wrong, but rather having to slow down enough to hear the wisdom I hold and the ways God is working in me to decide which way to go. And that is slower and more careful and less certain work. It can be tiring. That doesn't make it unimportant, though. Now, I'm going to have to explain a little bit of context in order to explain how Zechariah fits into all of this, but I'm going to get back to listening to what God is up to. In 587 to 586 BCE, Jerusalem was destroyed by the invading army of Babylon when the king had decided to stop making tribute payments. Many were killed, the temple was destroyed, the poor were left undefended, the wealthy and educated were forced marched to Babylon, where they stayed for generations. In 538 BCE, the Babylonian Empire was overthrown by the Persian Empire. Starting then, some of the descendants of those who had been forced marched to Babylon started to return. And over a long time, they eventually rebuilt the temple, the city, and the community of faith. The story of that rebuilding is what we're working on in Bible study. It is told there in Ezra and told in different ways by the prophets Haggai and Zechariah. Because, much like there are many ways to follow Jesus, the Bible is at peace with there being many ways to tell a story, and it doesn't assume that one perspective is right. Zechariah in our passage today is speaking about hope. God is going to return to Jerusalem with the people, and full and abundant life will be present again. I rather love the way that he talks about that by saying that there will again be elder women and elder men sitting on the streets watching, and there will again be girls and boys playing in the streets. So the abundance of life is captured by the presence of the old and young together, which is a great way of seeing it. The line that really pulls on me is attributed to God and says, though it seems miraculous in the eyes of the remnant of this people in these days, should it seem miraculous to me? Says the commander of the winged warriors. That is, God says, surely you don't think it's possible to rebuild, that life can be good again for all people, but should I let your fears stop what I want to do? And that's where I think we come back to listening to God and listening broadly, because I think that God is often dreaming and nudging us towards bigger and more wonderful things than we can dream on our own. And sometimes smaller and more wonderful things than we would allow for ourselves. Listening to God means being open to an astounding amount of love and how it wants to move in the world and how it wants to move in us in the world. So, in case I have not been clear enough yet, here are my points today. There is no single way to follow Jesus. You have to figure out your way yourself. And what God is up to in the world and in you is a beautiful, wonderful, loving thing. And I think it is worth the time to figure it out and to live it. May it be so. Amen.